Jonathan Majors. He was set to lead the MCU's next saga as Kang the Conqueror, appearing in Loki and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. The next Avengers movie was even titled The Kang Dynasty, but in March 2023, Majors was arrested and later found guilty of 2 misdemeanor charges. Within hours of the verdict, Disney and Marvel ended their partnership with him. This meant a major shift in Marvel's plans, with reports suggesting the studio may pivot to other villains like Doctor Doom. Majors himself acknowledged that a large company could not carry forward with such controversy. His exit marked one of the most significant recasts in MCU history, as the character of Kang had been positioned at the center of upcoming storylines. The impact of his departure extended beyond one film. Entire phases of the MCU had been pointing toward Kang as the multiversal threat, with hints scattered across Loki, Quantumania, and teases of future Avengers movies. Removing him created uncertainty not only for the studio's creative path, but also for fans who had been speculating about his role for years. Discussions quickly arose about whether Marvel would recast the character or completely shift to a different villain. The studio has not publicly announced its full replacement plan, but the situation stands as an example of how real-world issues can reshape long-term franchise storytelling. Edward Norton. He first appeared as Bruce Banner in The Incredible Hulk. Norton took a strong interest in shaping the film, rewriting parts of the script and favoring a darker, more character-driven tone. Marvel, however, aimed for a faster-paced blockbuster. Disagreements over the runtime and the overall cut of the film created tension, with Norton declining to promote the movie unless his version was used. Marvel eventually moved in a different direction, with Kevin Feige announcing Norton would not return, and emphasizing the need for a collaborative approach. Mark Ruffalo was brought in and has played the Hulk ever since. Norton later described the situation differently, but ultimately, it was a matter of creative vision and the studio's long-term plan. The Norton situation became a defining moment for Marvel in its early years. The Incredible Hulk was only the second MCU film, released the same year as Iron Man. While it introduced important lore like the Super Soldier Serum and tied loosely to the Avengers initiative, it has often been treated as a more standalone project. Part of the reason is the change of actors. Ruffalo's casting for the Avengers solidified the team's chemistry and set the tone for Hulk moving forward. Norton, meanwhile, remained firm that his exit was less about personality and more about business, pointing to his history of creative involvement in other projects. For Marvel, this situation was a reminder of the balance between individual artistry and a shared cinematic universe, where consistency and collaboration are critical. Terrence Howard. He played James Rhodey Rhodes in Iron Man 2008 and was originally the highest-paid actor on the film, earning more than Robert Downey Jr. At the time, Howard was a bigger star, but the success of Iron Man shifted the dynamics. For Iron Man 2, Marvel offered Howard a reduced salary compared to what he was expecting. When negotiations did not work out, the role was recast with Don Cheadle, who has continued to play Rhodey ever since. Howard later gave his perspective on the pay dispute, while the studio suggested other reasons for the change. Whatever the cause, this was the first major recast in the MCU, and it established how the studio would handle contract disputes in the future. Howard's departure also revealed the changing landscape of Hollywood contracts. Before the MCU became the cultural juggernaut it is today,
I'm the juggernaut,
Marvel Studios operated on much tighter budgets. The studio prioritized keeping costs low to sustain long-term plans. Howard, who had signed a 3-film deal, expected his salary to rise, but Marvel prioritized Downey's renegotiation after his breakout success. From Marvel's perspective, reallocating resources to secure their lead actor was essential. For Howard, it was a breach of trust. Over the years, he has spoken about his disappointment and how he felt sidelined by both Marvel and Downey.
Hey, that's what I'm talking about. When I get up in the morning and I'm putting on my uniform, you know what I recognize?
Fans debated whether the studio undervalued him or whether the recast was necessary for sustainability. Regardless, Don Cheadle's long run as Rhodey has become a cornerstone of the MCU, ensuring continuity across multiple films and series. Hugo Weaving. He played Red Skull in Captain America, the First Avenger, and was contracted for multiple films. However, when the character returned in Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame, Weaving did not reprise the role. He explained that he was not interested in returning, citing both the prosthetic-heavy process and difficulties during negotiations. Reports suggest he was also offered less money for both sequels combined than for his first appearance. Marvel recast the role with Ross Marquand, who closely matched Weaving's performance. Fans noticed the change, but the story continued smoothly. Weaving's departure wasn't due to poor performance or conflict. It was simply a case of the actor choosing not to return under the terms offered. What makes this case interesting is how seamlessly the character continued. Ross Marquand's performance, aided by visual effects, allowed Red Skull to reappear without losing continuity. Unlike other recasts, this one drew less attention because of the character's makeup and mystical transformation. Weaving himself later said that while he enjoyed the first film, he had no strong desire to continue in franchise roles. His preference was always for smaller, more varied projects, which gave him more creative satisfaction. In the broader MCU, his departure demonstrated Marvel's flexibility in preserving key storylines even when actors step away. The Red Skull's reappearance provided narrative closure and continuity, showing that characters can remain bigger than individual actors. Josh Dallas. He played Fandral, one of the Warriors 3, in the first Thor film. But by the time Thor: The Dark World was in production, Dallas was committed to his television role on Once Upon a Time. The scheduling made it impossible for him to continue in the MCU. The role went to Zachary Levi, who had actually been the original choice before scheduling conflicts kept him from the first film. Dallas later said he was disappointed, but the timing worked out for him as his TV role became a success. This wasn't a dramatic exit. It was simply a case of conflicting commitments, which often happens in large franchises. The story behind Fandral's casting is a unique case of role swapping. Levi was originally cast but had to drop out due to his work on Chuck. That opened the door for Dallas, who then had to step aside due to Once Upon a Time. When Levi returned, he carried Fandral into Thor: Ragnarok, where the Warriors 3 met their end. For Dallas, missing out on the sequels was bittersweet, but his television career flourished, and he met his future wife on set. His departure highlights the practical side of Hollywood scheduling, where long-running TV commitments often clash with blockbuster timelines. In the end, Marvel prioritized continuity in the character's role, ensuring the larger Thor story could move forward without disruption. Damien Poitier. In The Avengers 2012, Thanos appeared briefly in a post-credits scene, and Damien Poitier portrayed him. At that stage, the character's future was not fully mapped out. Poitier later explained that he didn't even know he was playing Thanos until he was in makeup. When Marvel decided to make Thanos a central figure, they turned to Josh Brolin, an actor with motion capture experience and star power. Poitier's role was a one-time cameo, but he remained part of the MCU family, later appearing in Captain America: Civil War as a mercenary. His replacement wasn't a controversy, just a natural evolution as the character grew in importance. Thanos eventually became the defining villain of the MCU's Infinity Saga, appearing in multiple films and culminating in Infinity War and Endgame. For that arc, Marvel needed a performer with experience carrying long-term roles and using advanced motion capture technology. Josh Brolin's casting elevated the character, making him both intimidating and relatable. For Poitier, being part of the MCU's early days was still a notable credit, and his continued stunt and acting work kept him connected to Marvel. His cameo remains an interesting footnote in MCU history, proof of how some early appearances serve as placeholders before a character's full vision is realized. Aaron Taylor Johnson. He played Quicksilver in Avengers: Age of Ultron. The character made a big impression but was killed off in the same film, sacrificing himself to save others. This was always part of the plan. Kevin Feige confirmed that Quicksilver's death was written into every draft of the script. Some fans speculated it also avoided confusion with Fox's version of Quicksilver in the X-Men films. Although there was an alternate cut where he survived, Marvel chose to keep the sacrifice in place to raise the stakes and add weight to Wanda's story. Taylor Johnson later moved to another Marvel-related role, starring as Kraven the Hunter in Sony's universe. His exit was not a firing, it was a narrative choice. The decision to kill Quicksilver also shaped Wanda Maximoff's development. Her grief and resilience became central themes in later projects, including WandaVision. From a storytelling perspective, Quicksilver's loss carried more weight than if he had remained, emphasizing that even heroes are not safe in the MCU. Fans still debate whether his potential was cut short, but the creative decision added depth to the overall saga. Taylor Johnson's later return to superhero cinema through Kraven shows how Marvel actors often continue to orbit comic book roles, even if their MCU journey ends earlier than expected. Catherine Langford. She was cast as Tony Stark's adult daughter, Morgan, in Avengers: Endgame. She filmed a scene where Tony meets her in the Soul World after his sacrifice, echoing Thanos meeting young Gamora in Infinity War. However, test audiences found the scene confusing, since they had only seen Morgan as a young child earlier in the film. The directors decided to cut the scene, saying it didn't add to Tony's already emotional farewell. Langford's performance remains in the deleted scenes, but it never made it into the final film. This wasn't a firing, it was an editing choice based on storytelling clarity. For Langford, it was a unique experience, being part of the MCU but not appearing in the theatrical release. The decision reflects how carefully Marvel calibrates its films, often trimming scenes that audiences might find distracting or overly complex, even if they include well-known actors. The Soul World sequence was poignant, but the filmmakers concluded it slowed the pacing and diluted Tony's already impactful farewell. While Langford's role never reached theaters, the deleted scene offers fans a glimpse of what might have been. Her case highlights how the editing process can dramatically reshape a performance's place in the MCU.